Hello everybody and welcome back to the Mortgage Administrator online event. This is the penultimate session of the day and we're going to be looking at mortgage fraud and what the key trends are, what to look out for and what steps you can do to protect your business and your customers. So this session is hosted by Diane Mitchell, who is Credit Director at Fleet Mortgages. She's worked at Fleet Mortgages for nearly 9 years and has worked across the industry at companies like Capital Home Loans and Mortgage Trust in various underwriting and manager positions. If you have any questions, if you go onto the left-hand side and there's an Ask a Question tab where you can submit your questions and they will be queued up for Diane at the end of the session. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Diane.
Hello everybody. Right, so I'm going to talk to you this afternoon about mortgage fraud and as I say, how you can protect yourself from mortgage fraud and what to look out for when you receive some of the documents. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the mortgage trends that the industry is seeing at the moment, and it really this year seems to have really heightened mortgage fraud. So we're seeing a lot of false or staged income coming through at the moment. And this can be, for example, where an applicant works for a family business and all of a sudden there's a sudden increase in the salary that's just been there really to facilitate them getting a mortgage. We've seen lots of false and altered pay slips. So that people are altering them or even just fabricating them to say they work for a company that they don't on the income that meets the lender's criteria. And the same for SA 302s that are coming through, they've been altered to meet the lender's criteria. Alongside that, we're seeing an increased amount of false or altered bank statements. And again, these are typically being used to either prove the income that the applicant is trying to say they earn or to provide evidence of the deposit monies. We're obviously a buy-to-let lender and we're seeing a lot of misuse of the mortgage property. So we're seeing people apply under standard buy-to-let when actually their intention is to convert the property into an either HMO or multi-unit block, or that they're actually going to use the property for short-term lets, Airbnbs, holiday lets, that type of thing. Or they're actually, at the moment, the big thing is that they're actually intending to reside in the property. We've seen a lot where the borrower has applied for a residential mortgage and been declined because their income isn't sufficient. And then we see it coming through to us on our fraud systems as a home loan, as a buy-to-let, where we know actually it's a home loan. So that's sort of way of the times, unfortunately, at the moment. And also another one that lenders will flag for mortgage fraud, and the trend appears to be where people don't disclose the adverse credit they've got, the true mortgage history or residential history, the full details of the transaction that's going on, or maybe even convictions. But lenders will treat this as mortgage fraud if an applicant hasn't provided that income to us. So what do we want to get out of today's presentation, the objective? So I want to show you some documents and what to look out for, understand why the customers alter the documents, and actually know your customers or the lead who's introduced this case to you. You know, are they backdoor brokers that have actually been removed from the FCA register or actually been removed from a lender's panel so they can't actually place the case there themselves, and actually using you to place the case for them? And actually then what the consequences to you and your firm could be if a lender receives false documents or altered documents that you've sent into the company. So let's have a look at some pay slips. So these pay slips are actual pay slips that Fleet Mortgages have received. I've obviously doctored them so you know, you can't see who they're for. But as I say, they are genuine documents that were submitted via a broker to Fleet Mortgages. And the first thing you can see about them is they're very, very basic pay slips. And typically, when there are false documents, they do tend to be very basic. Occasionally get ones that are more sophisticated, but they tend to be this type of pay slip. And really, you know, a very quick glance at these should highlight that actually there's inconsistencies with them, which would maybe make you think, actually, are these right? And either refer it to your compliance department or ask further questions. So, for example, you can see on this one, under the department, these are weekly pay slips, and we actually received 3 months of them. And all the way through the 3 months, they changed. They alternated between saying salary and the month and they just wouldn't. Your pay slip is your pay slip and it goes in the same format. So it just wouldn't change. So again, if you see something like that, be very wary as to whether these are actually genuine pay slips or not. Tax code is always a good thing to look at. You know, if somebody's getting benefits, they've got car loan, sort of car loans, or they have a company car or that sort of thing. Actually, is that tax code right? On this one, as I say, they are weekly paid, and so they earn over 100,000 a year. They would not be on that tax code. And again, the government have an easy website that people can use that would tell you what the tax code is. So again, it's just a good, easy spot. Does that look right? Even if you don't know what the tax code is, it's an easy spot that actually they just wouldn't have that tax code. It just doesn't look right. Next thing on these particular ones, you can see that the tax that the applicant had said that they were paying, 1 month it's £8, the next month it's £0. Again, with somebody earning that sort of salary, they would not be paying any tax. However, there could be a genuine reason why they're not paying tax. It could be that this is the applicant's business and actually he's paying his tax via his tax returns every year, and he just produces himself a pay slip but doesn't pay it. But you would need to understand that and go back and ask some further questions as to why he's not paying tax and why he's paying minimal tax. Then if you look at the year to gross, total gross tax pay, you can see that that doesn't add up either. So it's just sort of simple checks that you can look at to see whether or not they look genuine. As a consequence of this pay slip, not only was the applicant flagged on various fraud systems for fraud, but the broker was as well, because these sort of errors we would expect a broker to pick up. And if they don't, we would wonder, well, why? Are they just, their compliance isn't very good? Are they just being a post box, or actually are they complicit in it? And again, if you get a broker that's sending you in too many of these cases where there looks like there's false or suspicious documents that we're receiving in, eventually a lender will remove them from the panel. And again, that can have really serious consequences, because if you're a whole of market broker, you're not whole of market if you're being removed from lenders panel. So again, that can have serious consequences for you. Then if we look at one of the next documents that most lenders get in, a tax return, this is the SA 302, the HMRC version document. And I'm hoping that you're all looking at this and you can see the obvious mistakes on this document that we received in. So as you can see, the first one, the quid at the top of it, it's OUID, which stands for Organisation Unit Identifier. So again, why they made such a mistake, who knows? The second one is when you're looking at the income, between the pound sign and the actual figures, there is always a space there. And obviously this one doesn't have it. Obviously their grammar's not very good. Total income in, as opposed to on which tax is paid. And then you've got there should be a time sign before the 20 and 10%. And then you've got the other spelling mistakes at the top, dividend rather than dividends, and the tax credit at the bottom, that ceased. Now, I wouldn't expect anyone to necessarily know that, but, you know, sometimes when change of legislation happens, you know, you sort of need to look out for those on newer documents coming in to see if they've been left, to see whether actually they've just had dates changed. Again, on this one, because there was so many spelling mistakes on it, so much that was wrong, not only was the applicant flagged on this particular case, but also the broker was flagged for it. Again, it's just an example of the poor quality. If you're going to forge a document, at least put some time into it. I mean, it's just appalling, this particular one. Then we've got the bank statement that we have received in. And, you know, even from a quick glance at the statement, and sometimes when it is shown on a screen that you're getting them in or an email, it's hard to see. But the colours of the logo at the top of the HSBC isn't quite right on the statement. But even if you don't really get that because of the way it's performed for you, if you look at the opening balance on the account statement, you'll see that it's only 2,127.92. But if you actually look at the first line, that's actually increased to 52,127.52. And they've actually done that all the way through. They've put an extra 50,000 in there. And again, it's just an easy spot that the document is not genuine. The other thing to look out for is where the payments don't all line up. So if you've got payments in, they should all line up correctly. If they've got payments out, so should they. You can see that there's no gaps in this mortgage, in this bank statement. Quite often we see ones that do have gaps in there. And again, that's a very clear sign that these are fraudulent and is worth sort of showing your compliance team, but certainly not dealing with the customer. I mean, even when you look at the top where it says account summary, you can see that's all over the place where it's been doctored. We actually received this one in for proof of deposit. We loaded both the broker and the applicant for this false document. But since then, we've actually got a letter from the applicant's barrister who's actually blaming the broker for this document. We don't believe it was the broker that actually falsified the document. We do believe it was the applicant because the money was actually coming from the son. But the applicants will very, very quickly blame their broker for falsifying it. And then it's up to you to almost prove that it wasn't you that falsified that document. As a result of this particular payslip, this particular bank statement, because we found out as well that the deposit monies really weren't coming from the father in this case, it was coming from the children, and the broker knew about it and didn't tell us. He's actually been removed from panel, which has had serious consequences because he's no longer a whole of market broker and he had to leave his network because of it. So as I say, by not spotting or fully telling lenders the full transaction can actually put you in a difficult situation. So there's the few documents that we've sent to you. Have any of you got any questions?
Hi, Diane. How's it
Hello.
going? Yes, let me just look at the attendee questions now. One question that's come through is, do you think the cost of living or worsening affordability could lead to a rise in mortgage fraud? I know that you mentioned in the presentation that this, there had been an increase in the past year or so.
Definitely. I mean, I attend lots of fraud meetings, both at UK Finance and at CIFAS and various others, and mortgage fraud this year and towards the end of last year has really increased, and the amount of false documents we're getting is we used to maybe get one false document every sort of like couple of months. So far this month we've received 3.
Wow.
We've received 2 we've received 1 false lot of pay slips, 1 SA302 and a bank statement. And actually
were they all different applications, or was it?
Yes, different applications. Some of them for portfolio customers. So there was more than one property involved in it. But every lender that we're speaking to has seen a real increase in the number of false documents and mortgage fraud that we're getting at the moment.
Great. And what I suppose, I think a lot of brokers and administrators, will be thinking about, you know, with the volatile market conditions, with products being pulled at the last minute, you know, obviously, you know, do you think that that makes it more challenging to kind of catch these kind of, you know, things that you would in normal market conditions you would normally catch? Do you think there is a risk that more of these kinds of things might slip through the net?
Yeah, I think definitely when the market is tough, lenders do receive the corner of the desk cases, as we call them, sort of thing, with more applicants thinking that, you know, maybe because of lenders' volumes, that they will miss it and it will just go through. But a lot of them don't realise that if they apply to a lender for a loan and it gets declined by them, I think what people don't always realise is that if they then submit another case to another lender, they can actually see from the fraud systems that that applicant has been declined for a mortgage, and they will start asking more questions. So, you know, lenders, the technology lenders have nowadays to see what's gone on with that customer or broker, it is amazing. You can see that, but it's, yeah, definitely in this climate, they are trying more ways to get through.
Right, that's quite scary to think about. But just looking at some of the other questions, I suppose within the trends that you mentioned, are there any, you know, obviously brokers and administrators should be mindful of all of them, but are there any specific ones that you know that particular attention should be paid to, or that brokers should or an administrator should be particularly mindful of?
I think, you know, like the way I train our underwriters is, does the case make sense? So as soon as you think that something doesn't add up, then check everything, because normally identifying the false pay slips or documents normally comes after there's something else that doesn't seem to sit right. And then you get the gut feeling for that case that actually, you know, they're, you know, 25 years old and they've got a £2 million portfolio. Well, where did that come from? You know, that there's other things that they might tell you. You know, I've had one broker that even sort of said to me that, you know, a customer walked in and almost said to them, well, what salary do I need? You know, as if, you know, they could then get that. So sometimes it can be just a slip of the tongue that somebody says to you that you might think, actually, that just doesn't fit right. And then it's looking at the other documents. But normally when I've looked at the whole case, there's been other telltale signs, not just looking at that document. There's been something else that's made us look at the document.
Yeah, that actually segues quite nicely into another question, which is, are there any common warning signs to look out for? I mean, obviously you kind of went through different documents and actually pointed out, like, actually these are things you can keep out for, but you mentioned actually it's not just about the documents, it's about how the customer's presenting themselves with the information that they've given. So I suppose, are there any warning signs that you kind of talk to your underwriters about?
Yeah, so I mean, it is that gut feeling. It's you know, it's like, I mean, most brokers nowadays do AML checks themselves. So, you know, if somebody is sort of quite a young person, you know, most people have a phone, they have credit cards, they have other loans. If you're looking at somebody that doesn't have much credit commitments, why? You know, have they got another address somewhere that they're hiding from you? You know, sometimes if you're doing especially with the buy-to-let, sometimes they tend to be more mature people, and sometimes they don't have a lot of credit. But it is always something that if I see a very thin Equifax file, why is it so thin? Where are they living? You know, I had a bank statement that was sent to me a couple of days ago, and actually on the bank statement that they'd sent, on the address, it had returned post that they'd obviously printed it off, but the bank had actually put that they'd had returned post. Well, right. You know, I would have thought that the administrator or whoever sent it to us should have looked at it and thought, actually, perhaps I need to go back and ask a question for this. But it's definitely things that don't fit right for the profile of the customer. I mean, I've seen other bank statements where we've had somebody that was a quite elderly lady. I think she was in her 80s, and all of a sudden she started buying things at high-end shops. And actually it turned out that I think her daughter had sort of problems and had taken her card and all the rest of it. But it's things like that to look out for. Does that make sense as to what you're getting? you know, even if you're doing a joint mortgage, are you always speaking to one of them? Does the other person know about it? You know, it's just sort of warning signs as to what's actually going on the case. And sometimes, as I say, it can just be something that's being said to you that makes you think, actually, I'm not sure about this.
Yeah, or is I suppose it is that kind of gut feeling. If it doesn't match up, or if you think that something's wrong, always double check it.
Yes.
Something interesting that's just come through is about consumer duty. So the FCA has said we've seen that mortgage intermediary firms do not have sufficient systems and controls in place to mitigate against fraud. I know that you mentioned a lot of brokers are doing their own AML checks. How can they rectify that in time for consumer duty? Because obviously we're about a month out from those regulations coming into force. So I don't know if you can speak to that at all.
It's a very difficult one, because lenders are really helped by the fraud systems that we have. I mean, we have CIFAS, we have CIRA, we have Hunter, and lenders, you know, load on them, insurance companies load on them, you know, the police load, you know, everybody loads on those systems. But unfortunately, they're not open to brokers. So you're not able to have access to those systems. So really, the only way that you can really protect yourself against it is within the training, is making people understand the case, look at the documents, have a good compliance team that they've got, that, or somebody that your admin staff or brokers can refer cases to actually see. I mean, property hijack, for example, is on the increase as well. We had it back in about 2008 and in 2004, actually, where there were solicitors infiltrating solicitors' firms to do property hijack. And we've seen that slightly on the increase as well. And that goes into, again, thin files, you know, looking at the documents that you've received. You know, people go to extremes to get this, but as the sort of as things tighten, the fraudsters are more desperate to get their hands on money, and property is you know, they've only got to do £1 million mortgage and, you know, they've won, sort of thing. So, and they will look for any weaknesses. So that's the trouble. If they've managed to get a case through to you with a false document, they know your systems are weak. And you'll get other cases either from that applicant or them to saying, actually, they haven't got good systems in place to spot the fraud.
Right. So it is, you know, vital to kind of make sure that your systems are strong and that you've kind of got all the right checks in place. And one other question is about how technology can be used to help with mortgage fraud, because you mentioned that system. The system, or the multiple systems that lenders have. Does there need to be a system that brokers can use, or should brokers be able to see a version of those systems so that they, you know, or, you know, I'm just interested in whether that could help.
It's a real difficult one, because I think CIRA and CIFAS and places like that have been reluctant to allow brokers to have access to them because of rogue brokers sending in cases, and then they would be able to see what they've got. But within your net, I mean, I know that some networks and clubs are very good at even sending us, when their brokers have had a case, and they send us all the details through. So it's looking at the cases that you're getting through. For example, when I do a broker review on my brokers, I look at, you know, things like, am I getting a lot of where the accountant is always the same? You know, are the pay slips that we're getting in, you know, on a day all the same style of pay slips? Do they all work for the same company? Especially if you're getting your cases from another introducer, because you tend to find, if it's a big fraud where it's, you know, not just the odd person wanting a mortgage and they've you know, lied about how much their income is, but if it's a fraud ring, you'll find that they all work as accountants, or they all work as chefs, or, you know, they tend to have it all the same. And you'll be able to profile to say, you know, I've got an awful lot of applications in where they're all chefs, they're all earning over 50,000, they're all this. And the one thing advice I give to the underwriters, if you've got suspicions about somebody, Google them. If you Google the name, you will be amazed at what you can find out about people, whether their tenants in the past have ever sort of taken them to court for something. You know, we Googled one the other day, and actually she had previously committed HMRC tax fraud, and she got a 2-year suspended sentence and various other things. But if you Google people, that is a really brilliant way of actually being able to find out if there's any adverse information.
Well,
Similarly,
sorry, I was just going to say it's good to know that.
Yeah, even searching their limited companies. So if they work for a limited company and they're self-employed and they tell you they're earning 100,000, do a quick company's house search and see what their company accounts show you. You know, so there are other things that you can do yourself to actually verify the information that they're sending to you.
That's good. So there's some good tips there. I've got another question. Someone's asking, so do you need to see proof of deposit from Bank of Mum and Dad in initial documents sent by the client? Is that something that would be necessary?
Because we're a buy-to-let lender, we don't necessarily get a lot of Bank of Mum and Dad stuff. But as a general rule, if money are coming from a family member, we do like to see where the money's coming from for money laundering things. Because again, in the buy-to-let, it's a very easy way to launder money, because you can have the property standing empty and paying the rent, and then in a few years' time or a year's time, redeem the loan. So we are quite hot on where the deposit monies are actually coming from.
Good. And there's one thing about EPC legislation. Obviously, it's not in force yet, but by 2025, existing tenancies should have an EPC rating of C or higher, and by 2028 for all tenancies. Hopefully, I got that the right way around. Do you think that there might be, with retrofit products that say, oh, we will give you X amount of money if you improve your properties? Do you think that there's a risk that some people, and you have to use the money for a specific reason? Do you think there's a risk of kind of more fraud on that side of things, that people might just want to take the money and might not make the improvements? Or is that quite I understand it's very niche, but I just thought I'd ask.
It depends on the way the lender does the product. So it sounds like I'm going to plug ours at the moment. So, for example, with ours, if anybody takes out a mortgage with us today, they have to complete, I think, after the 1st of July, and they come to a say and they're currently an E. And at any time they bring it up to a C, we will give them £1,000 cash back. So it depends how your product is designed to make sure that they do the works and that it is now a C. So we would then check the EPC register and make sure now it is a C before we gave them the £1,000.
Right. It's good to know. And I suppose one other question that's come through is, how can administrators be more vigilant in an increasingly digital era? I suppose, like you were saying, that fraudsters get increasingly desperate, or they might become, if they find a weakness, or they might become, some of the payslips and documents that come through look quite basic, but you get some more kind of high-end ones coming through. Okay. So
yes. Well, some of that is you get your documents in a better way, in a way, than we do, because we get them and they get uploaded to a system. But you normally get the genuine documents that are emailed to you. And if you hover over them, you can quite often see whether or not who the last person that's touched that document, who's edited it. Now, if it's not the Inland Revenue, or it's not who it's supposed to be, or it's not actually locked down, because most things that you get, like from HMRC or somebody like that, is actually locked down. If it's not saying that it's locked down, the chances are it's been edited. So again, just by hovering over parts, and there is one, you can go on to properties. If you right click, you can go on to properties, and again, that can show you whether that document has ever been edited. So again, the way you get your documents, is actually easier for you to be able to do those checks to make sure that what you're getting is genuine.
Great. So I think we are nearly out of time. So I suppose if you just wanted to wrap up, if there was one thing you wanted brokers and administrators to take away from this session, what would you want it to be?
I think it is just protect yourself, because unfortunately it is your reputation and your business as well that really suffers when applicants do falsify documents. And be careful of a broker submitting cases to you, because you don't know whether they've been removed from other lenders panels.
Great. I think that's a really good note to end on. I thank you so much, Diane, for that really useful session. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I thought the mortgage trends and tips for reviewing documents were really, really valuable. So the last session of the day is at 2. So if you need to get a quick bite to eat or a cup of tea, now's the time to do so. And see you in the last session. Thank you so much.